to my 40s, God was really a distant influence in my life. I was praying grace at meals, saying evening prayers, going to Mass on Sunday, but really that was about it. But after around my 40s, I started to feel something a little deeper going on inside me, a call to go deeper inside, a call to enter into a relationship with God and to get to know Him better. At that time, this was around 2004, and an opportunity came up to go to Kenya on a volunteer posting. And my husband and I, at the time, took that opportunity and headed over to Kenya. And that is where my life began to unravel totally. But it eventually got woven back together. And going to Kenya I had left behind a marketing business. I sold or gave away most of my goods and rented out my house. During the first year of the volunteer posting, my marriage, which had been floundering pretty badly, completely broke down. And I returned to Canada for a little while to discern my future, to figure out what was next, what I should be doing. And during that time, my brother invited me to join him for a retreat. This was around 2008 or 2009. The retreat had as a theme living life to the fullest, based on the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 10. And my life at that time was feeling anything but full. It was feeling pretty messy, burdensome, and I just was in a place that I never expected to be and didn't want to be. So I was looking for some direction and what to do next. So I went along to this retreat. And during the retreat, I was invited to invite Jesus into my life, to make him the center of my life, and to say yes to the Holy Spirit. At first, I was actually pretty hesitant about that. I wanted a deeper experience and I wanted to get to know God. I did want to invite him into my life, but I was afraid. I had a lot of fear of what that meant. I didn't know what that really meant, and I was afraid that he was going to ask something of me that I couldn't give. And I had a real sense of unworthiness, not really deserving more or better. But over the course of the next 3 days of that retreat, listening to the talks, I began to kind of relax and open up my heart. And I was able to say yes to Jesus and to say, yeah, I do want you to come in and take charge. I want to stop being in control of everything. I want to say yes, and I want to be directed by you. A little before the end of the retreat, something happened to me that I'll never forget. It was sort of having a vision, but it wasn't outside my head. It wasn't with my eyes. It was more, I describe it like a memory. So I saw Jesus as the weaver of my life. And I could clearly see him standing at this weaver's frame, and scattered on the floor around him were all the disparate strands of my life. And he was picking up each strand and weaving them together into this beautiful unified whole. From where I was sitting, I couldn't see the tapestry that he was making, but I was just filled with a real sense of confidence and peace that whatever he was making of that tapestry was going to be really beautiful, and that I could trust him, and that I just needed to stop being afraid and let him do his work. In Kenya, I had gotten involved with a group of children, and I was helping them to stay in school. I was tutoring them in the afternoon, paying school fees for them. Friends had come to visit and they helped me to buy school supplies, and even brought hand-me-down shoes from their children to keep them in school. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but that was the seed that later on turned into the charitable organization that I'm now running in Kenya. And After my separation and returning to Canada, I'd really been hemming and hawing what to do about Kenya. Should I go back? Or I was also thinking, should I go to university and do something in the field of education? But through the experience of that retreat and that vision of Christ as the weaver of my life, I really got a strong sense to go back to Kenya, to commit myself to my children, to the children I was engaged with, and to the projects that I had started. And at this point now, I really did believe that God was directing my life and that this was the right decision for me. And I had a sense of something good and wonderful waiting for me. But back to the retreat. Right after the retreat, the first thing that happened to me, the first change I found in my life was I immediately dropped my attachment to consumerism. I went up to our local shopping mall pretty soon after the retreat just to do some grocery shopping. And as I got to the main doors, I heard this voice in my head saying, "Nina, you've come to do grocery shopping and that's all you're here for." And I thought, okay. And from that day forward, I dropped the sort of meaningless window shopping, saved a whole lot of my time and a whole lot of my money, not wasting my time on meaningless shopping. The other thing that came out of that retreat was that the Mass really opened up for me. I began to see it as this long prayer or a series of prayers. I began to be interested in reading the Bible, especially the stories of Jesus' life in the Gospels. I started to introduce a structure of prayer into my life, finding peace and comfort with the daily rosary, the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And I began going to Mass daily, which is something I still do today. And I really developed a love for spending time with Jesus in the Holy Eucharist in adoration, which again is something that is still part of my week, every week. So after the retreat and that experience, I committed myself to going back to Kenya. And in returning, I got back involved with this group of children, which eventually became a small children's home. And I was working with sponsoring girls to a sewing program and helped to build a primary school. I was using my own funds at the time and just reaching out to some friends and family. And I grew to realize that I just can't continue to do this on my own. And this is now where that image of Jesus as the weaver in my life really began to make sense to me. I started to look into starting up a charity. And suddenly people from all parts of my life were coming back into my life. A really good friend of mine joined, actually came and spent time with me in Kenya and helped me to start up the charity, joined the board. A friend of my brother's from high school, I went and sought some advice from him, ended up on my board as well. Around that time, I was walking around my neighborhood, and the woman that I used to babysit for came up to me. And she'd heard about what I was doing in Kenya, or that I had been in Kenya, and said, "Oh, I hear that you've got some projects in Kenya, and I'm looking for some volunteer work. I'd love to volunteer for you." And I remember just thinking, I don't even know what I'm doing. What do I need to volunteer for? But shortly after that, I realized that, well, I've got a board now. We're going to start doing some fundraising, and I'll be going back to Kenya. So who's going to look after the banking and the receipts and the administrative things that need to be done? And that previous babysitting client of mine happened to be a really good office administrator. So I went back to her, and she became our first volunteer office administrator and did that for 9 years. Soon after that, a couple years after that, another woman called me up and invited me for breakfast. We used to be on parish council together at church. And she told me that she'd had this really strong feeling that God was banging her over the head to get involved and support me. And she made a very generous donation to me that day and began to tell me that she had also been volunteering, but that was coming to an end. She had been a treasurer at an organization. She really enjoyed that work. But now it was coming to an end, and she was sort of lamenting that. And we finished up, and the next day I thought about that, and I realized, hey, I need a treasurer. So I called up my friend and I said, I think that God had a bigger plan for us. I was very grateful for the donation, but I really need a treasurer. And she was very pleased to accept that and joined the board and has been with us ever since. Over time, old friends were coming back into the picture. I was meeting new friends. Wonderful people were coming into my life. And it seemed like in no time at all, Elimu, my charity, was up and running, registered, and we began fundraising. So in the first year, I raised $14,000. Today, we're a $300,000 operation, and we've been helping hundreds of children and youth and their parents to live their lives to the fullest. And Jesus' promise as the weaver of my life has just been coming through over and over and over again. I never know what to expect, but I know that he is weaving a very beautiful whole that I still can't see all of, but the many, many parts of my life have started to come together. People are involved from all different areas of my life. And my personal life has been rich and fulfilling despite the divorce, despite the fact that I'm alone. I find that my faith and this living relationship with Jesus, it does fill me. And I've never really suffered a sense of loneliness since I made this choice. So I don't always remember to trust God. I'm not always perfect at it. It's still a struggle from time to time. But usually I do hang on, get through, and get grounded again and continue to trust him. If you're listening to me right now and you have that same feeling that I had back in 2004, looking for something deeper in your life, wanting to get a better understanding of how God acts in your life and a richer relationship with him. Maybe you're also feeling that sense of fear of the future that I had, or that what he wants is bigger than you could give, or maybe that sense of unworthiness and not deserving more. I want to just encourage you to put aside fear and trust God. He's just always got our best interests at heart. He knows what we want before we do. And he's really capable of bringing out our heart's desires. He does it so gently and step by step. There's nothing to be afraid of. And he'll just open doors and lead the right people to you, or you to the right people. So take a step, take that first step and say yes. And then gently and wonderfully, he'll just start guiding you in the right direction. Today, I give everything over to him, and I just wait to see what's next. And some pretty amazing and wonderful adventures have come my way. I'm very sure now that trusting in him and continuing to say yes to Jesus, I'll always be living my life to the fullest.